Admiral Kistal sliced his razor-tipped claws through the holographic star chart, a gesture that sent his subordinates' exoskeletons flushing anxious yellow. His 6 eyes narrowed as he examined the uncharted system, each pupil contracting to a predatory slit. 37 species, he chittered, his mandibles clicking with precise pride. Not one requiring more than a standard battle group. The bridge of the inevitable dominion hummed with the subtle vibrations of perfectly calibrated technology. 15 millennia of hegemony engineering had produced vessels of such refinement that their primary function, conquest, had become almost artistically elegant. "The Supreme Matriarch herself has commended your efficiency, Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Vexorn, his secondary appendages positioned in the gesture of appropriate adulation. When long-range sensors detected the uncharted system with unusual mineral signatures, Kistal's exoskeleton flushed the deep blue of ambition, visible even beneath his ceremonial armor plates. Another system, another conquest, another accolade to add to his immaculate record. "Full scan protocol," he ordered, settling his weight into the command throne, crafted from the ossified remains of the first species to resist hegemony expansion. A reminder of the futility of defiance. The xenobiologist, Dr. Kyanpoi, nearly ruptured her speech sacs when the results materialized in her sensory chamber. Atmospheric anomalies on the third planet. Nitrogen-oxygen mix. Her voice elevated to the pitch reserved for religious revelations, and primitive radio signals. Sentience. Kistal's feeding tentacles writhed with anticipation. Unregistered in the hegemony catalog, Admiral, they call themselves humans. Intelligence reports streamed across the command deck's crystalline displays. Pre-FTL civilization. Fractured global governance structure. Primitive kinetic weaponry. Delightfully exploitable biological vulnerabilities. The bridge officers chittered in the harmonic frequency of anticipated victory. "Perhaps we should harvest the inhabitants for the pleasure arenas," suggested Vexorn, his exoskeleton flushing the purple of recreational cruelty. Their physical configuration suggests they would provide entertaining combat against the Enxtali gladiator strains. "We follow protocol," Kistal answered, his voice carrying the harmonic inflection that indicated absolute authority. "Standard intimidation procedures. Show of force, followed by demands for surrender. The matriarchy wishes this sector fully incorporated by the next lunar alignment." The hegemony vanguard, 12 vessels of graduated threat capability, surged toward the blue-green world, their propulsion systems leaving rainbow distortions in the fabric of spacetime. As they approached the planet's orbital defense grid, the tactical officer, Murdat, projected the scattered satellites onto the main display. "Such primitive technology," he mocked, his derision glands secreting the pheromones of contempt. "These constructs appear to use chemical propellants and rudimentary solar collection. I detect no defensive capabilities beyond basic communication relays." His laughter died in his throat as proximity alarms suddenly shrieked across the command deck with a frequency that induced pain in hegemony auditory membranes. The bridge crew's exoskeletons collectively paled to alabaster as the main viewscreen adjusted to display the new threat. From behind the planet's moon emerged a vessel of war unlike anything in hegemony records. Angular, massive, and broadcasting no energy signature whatsoever. Its hull was a matte black that seemed to devour light rather than reflect it, broken only by recessed weapon ports whose purpose defied immediate classification. Kistal's feeding tentacles went rigid with confusion as the tactical display struggled to calculate the ship's dimensions. When the numbers finally stabilized, a cold sensation spread through his circulatory fluids. The human vessel was 3 times the mass of his flagship. "Impossible," whispered Vexorn, his exoskeleton now the white of primal terror. Our intelligence indicated they had not yet achieved viable interplanetary transit. Admiral Kistal, conqueror of 37 worlds, felt something he had not experienced since larval stage. Doubt. The human warship, the TCS Retribution, loomed on the command view screen, its scale rendering the inevitable dominion. pride of the hegemony, into insignificance. For the first time in recorded history, a hegemony bridge fell completely silent. Science Officer Trillax repeatedly calibrated her instruments, her six-fingered hands trembling over the crystalline interface. The readings cannot be accurate, she chittered, her voice pitched higher than protocol permitted. I detect no energy emissions consistent with a vessel of this mass. Where hegemony vessels gleamed with crystalline towers and ornamental energy conduits, deliberate displays of aesthetic and technological superiority. The Terran ship was brutally utilitarian. No artistic flourishes softened its silhouette, just layered armor plating scarred by what appeared to be previous conflicts, studded with recessed weapon emplacements whose purpose defied classification. Admiral Kistal activated the magnification field. The hull bore markings in the primitive human script. Beside the designation TCS Retribution, a curious emblem displayed a skull-like structure over crossed bones, a death symbol. They advertised their mortality, questioned Vexorn, cultural interpretation glands pulsing with confusion. Perhaps they worship death. Most unsettling was the vessel's ghostly presence. No energy shields shimmered around its hull, no power cores registered on scans, as if the massive structure was simply dead metal drifting in space. Could it be a derelict? Suggested Mordat hopefully. An ancient warship positioned as a deterrent. His question was answered when the Retribution adjusted its position with precisely calculated microburst thrusters, maintaining stance between the hegemony fleet and Earth with mathematical perfection. Communication Officer Pexel nervously chittered his mandibles, antennae flattened against his head in the posture of anticipated rejection. Opening standard diplomatic channels. Admiral. This is Admiral Kestel of the glorious Hegemony Expansion Fleet, he announced, his voice artificially deepened by the translator to convey appropriate dominance. Your world has been selected for incorporation into the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Resistance is. His practiced speech echoed back across the command deck. No response. No counter-demands. Seconds stretched into minutes of unbearable silence. Perhaps their communication technology is incompatible, suggested Trillax. Impossible, hissed Kestel. Our systems are designed to interface with any conceivable transmission method. His feeding tentacles writhed with impatience. Send the message again on all frequencies. 3 more attempts yielded nothing but silence. The Retribution continued its perfect positioning, adjusting with minimal energy expenditure to maintain its protective stance before Earth. They mock us, Kistel finally declared, his exoskeleton flushing the crimson of authorized aggression. Tactical Officer, prepare warning shots. Target the space before their bow. Demonstrate the consequences of discourtesy to the hegemony. Neurdat's compound eyes suddenly widened with alarm. Admiral, the human vessel, it's moving. On the tactical display, a new alert flashed as sensors detected unknown objects launching from Retribution's flanks. Energy weapons? Demanded Kestel. Negative, Trillax whispered, her scientific pride dissolving into incomprehension. They appear to be solid projectiles, simple metal alloys, primarily tungsten. Her voice faltered. But they're accelerating to velocities our tracking systems cannot calculate. Primitive kinetic weapons. Vexorn laughed, tension breaking his composure. Our shields are designed to withstand. The tactical display erupted with warning symbols, tracking systems struggling to follow objects moving at relativistic speeds. For the first time in 15 millennia of hegemony conquest, an opponent had fired the first shot. The universe seemed to hold its breath as the tungsten rods crossed the vast emptiness of space, aimed not at the flagship, but at the celestial dominance, the newest, most advanced vessel in the fleet. The pride of the hegemony vanguard, the celestial dominance, erupted in a spectacular blossoming of atmosphere and structural debris. Its shields, designed to withstand the combined energy output of 3 rival empires, registered the incoming projectiles too late. Tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds tore through the vessel from bow to stern, converting their kinetic energy into a cataclysmic release of heat and force. On the flagship's command deck, Admiral Kistol's exoskeleton paled to sickly white as battle footage showed his most advanced warship bisected by what his civilization considered primitive technology. 4,000 crew members, the finest graduates of the Imperial Academy, reduced to vapor in milliseconds. "Impossible," whispered Science Officer Trillax, mandibles slack with disbelief. She frantically analyzed the weapons' signatures, her multiple eyes darting between displays. Their kinetic weapons should have been rendered obsolete millennia ago. No species pursues projectile technology beyond their first century of space exploration. The remaining hegemony vessels instinctively adopted defensive sphere formations, energy shields overlapping in patterns that had repelled the most sophisticated attacks from a dozen conquered star nations. The retribution struck again. This time, the kinetic projectiles were smaller, precisely targeted. They slipped through the overlapping shields like needles through fabric, each impact deliberately striking propulsion systems and weapons arrays with surgical accuracy. "They're not seeking to destroy," observed Vexorn, his tactical glands pulsing with dawning comprehension. "They're disabling us." Tactical displays flooded with damage reports across the fleet. 4 vessels lost primary engines. 3 more reported weapons systems failure. The inescapable conclusion sent waves of terror pheromones through the recycled air. The humans were toying with them. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Kistol slammed his primary appendage against the command console. "All functional vessels, concentrate plasma cannons on the human ship. Full discharge." The hegemony's much-vaunted plasma technology, harnessing the power of artificial stars, was their ultimate weapon. Energy readings spiked across the fleet as capacitors charged to maximum output. On Kistol's command, blinding streams of superheated matter lanced across space toward the retribution. The human vessel responded with subtle shifts in position, allowing several plasma streams to dissipate harmlessly in the void. When direct hits did land, the retribution's hull absorbed the impacts with minimal damage. Scorched armor plates revealing layer upon layer of metamaterials unlike anything in the hegemony materials database. "It should be vaporized," Trillax exclaimed, her scientific worldview crumbling. "No material can withstand concentrated plasma discharge." In the science bay, Trillax's assistants frantically analyzed fragments sheared from the human ship by the plasma impacts. Their findings caused such distress that one young officer's chromatophores permanently locked into the purple hue of existential terror. "Admiral," the junior scientist reported, voice trembling, "the human vessel's hull contains metastable alloys we cannot identify. Each layer appears designed to ablate energy in specific wavelengths, converting our attacks into—" He paused, scientific training failing him, "into power for their own systems." Kistol's pride, carefully cultivated over centuries of military service, shattered like glass. The hegemony had not merely encountered an unexpected defense, they had stumbled upon a technological paradigm that rendered their most advanced weapons obsolete. As if emphasizing this revelation, the retribution launched another volley of kinetic penetrators. This time, they struck the harmonious subjugation with mathematical precision, severing its primary command neural network while leaving life support intact. For the first time in recorded hegemony history, a fleet commander contemplated retreat from a pre-FTL civilization. "It can't be there," stuttered Navigation Officer Grelzik, his tentacle digits trembling over holographic controls. The human vessel was at coordinates 331 just moments ago. The battle had devolved into chaos as the retribution seemingly bent space around itself, appearing in positions that should require minutes to reach even with the hegemony's most advanced drives. It materialized behind the harmonious subjugation, disabled its engines with precision fire, then vanished before the hegemony's targeting systems could acquire a lock. In the flagship's tactical center, elite hegemony mathematicians and physicists hunched over data streams, their normally immaculate uniforms stained with stress secretions. The air hung heavy with the bitter scent of fear pheromones. How does a supposedly pre-FTL species possess such advanced propulsion? Demanded Kistel, smashing a tactical display in frustration. The crystalline shards scattered across the deck, crunching beneath his armored limbs as he paced. A young xenotechnologist, Jivener, trembled as she approached with findings. Her carapace, still soft from recent molting, bore the green markings of the Science Academy's most promising graduate. "Admiral," she whispered, presenting a data tablet with shaking appendages. "We've been analyzing their movement patterns. They didn't follow our path." "Explain," growled Kistel. "Humans never developed energy shields because they pursued entirely different technological branches." Jivenor continued, gaining confidence as scientific curiosity temporarily overcame her terror. Their advancements focused on perfecting inertial dampeners and gravitational manipulation instead. They're not using conventional propulsion. They're creating localized space-time distortions. Further analysis revealed something more terrifying. The Retribution didn't broadcast energy signatures because its systems were contained within nested Faraday cages and quantum-locked circuitry, rendering it nearly invisible to conventional scans. "An entire technological lineage designed to be undetectable," muttered Vexorn. "But why would a species evolve such capabilities unless they anticipated encountering other civilizations?" Kistel finished, the implications chilling his hemolymph. "They knew we were coming. They knew exactly how we would scan for them." Grelzic's voice cracked as he interrupted. "Admiral, the human vessel has reappeared. It's directly ahead." On the main view screen, the Retribution materialized so close to the flagship that individual weapon ports were visible, like the eyes of some ancient predator studying its prey before the kill. The massive human vessel had performed a space-time fold that bypassed 12 layers of defensive screening, rendering billions of resources in hegemony defensive technology worthless. "How many more are there?" whispered Vexorn, vocalization glands constricting with terror. "If this is merely their first contact vessel." Admiral Kistel's feeding tentacles went limp as the awful truth settled in his mind. The hegemony's intelligence was catastrophically wrong. They had not encountered a primitive civilization on the verge of space exploration. They had stumbled upon a species that had followed an entirely different technological evolution, one that had anticipated and prepared for this exact encounter. "All vessels, hold position," he ordered, his voice devoid of its usual hierarchical harmonics. "Cease all aggressive actions." A junior officer's exoskeleton flushed with shock. "We're surrendering to pre-FTL primitives." Kistel fixed his 6 eyes on the young officer. "Those are not primitives," he said, gesturing to the Retribution looming on the view screen. "That is a species that mastered gravity before energy projection. They didn't build shields because they created something far worse. They learned to weaponize physics itself. Retreat to designated faster-than-light jump points. All vessels, emergency protocols." Admiral Kistel's voice cracked with uncharacteristic emotion as he broadcast across what remained of his once proud vanguard. 17 ships disabled, 3 completely destroyed. A catastrophe unprecedented in hegemony military history. On the tactical display, FTL exit vectors appeared as glowing lifelines of escape, calculated by the finest navigational eye the Empire had produced. Mathematical perfection, thousands of years of stellar cartography distilled into optimal retreat paths. Then, one by one, they began to vanish. The Retribution, somehow anticipating their withdrawal strategy, systematically positioned itself to cut off escape routes. At each calculated jump point, the human vessel would appear momentarily, deploy what appeared to be small autonomous drones, then vanish again. The drones generated localized gravity distortions that rendered FTL translation impossible. "It's hurting us," whispered Lieutenant Commander Vexorn, ancestral memories of being prey stirring in his genetic memory. His chromatophores flickered between terror white and outrage crimson, unable to settle on a single emotional state. Most disturbing was the human vessel's continued silence. No demands, no threats, No gloating ultimatums as hegemony protocol dictated for victorious encounters. It communicated only through deliberate, precise action. The ship's behavior violated every principle of sapient conflict resolution in the hegemony's 15,000-year archive of interspecies contact. Even the most aggressive species they had encountered announced their intentions, made demands, offered terms. Captain Zorvac of the Righteous Dominion, his nerve breaking, suddenly accelerated toward a narrow opening in the human blockade. His ship's engines flared brilliant azure as they pushed beyond safety parameters. All eyes on the command deck turned to the tactical display. The Retribution fired, not to destroy, but with surgical precision that severed the fleeing ship's command module while leaving life support intact. The message was unmistakable. We could kill you all, but choose not to. Among the hegemony officers, chromatic indicators of emotional states flashed between terror white and shame purple. For a species that had conquered through technological intimidation for 15 millennia, being so thoroughly outmatched shattered not just morale, but their entire perception of the cosmos. In the medical bay, the chief psychic empath collapsed, overwhelmed by the collective existential crisis radiating from every hegemony mind aboard. What manner of evolution, she gasped before losing consciousness, produces beings that fight with such merciless efficiency, yet such calculated restraint? On the command deck, Kistel's primary heart valves constricted painfully as he contemplated a decision no admiral had made in recorded history. "Prepare universal surrender protocols," he ordered, each word physically painful to vocalize. The communication officer stared in disbelief. "Admiral, the matriarchy will have your spawning rights revoked. If we resist further, the matriarchy will have nothing but memory crystals to document our existence." Kistel responded, his voice hollow. "The humans are not fighting to destroy us. They are testing us. Each attack has been precisely calibrated to demonstrate a capability we believed impossible." "Testing for what purpose?" asked Vexorn. Kistel's feeding tentacles lay limp against his thoracic plating. "To determine whether we are worthy of communication at all." As the surrender message was prepared, Kistel studied the retribution on the view screen. For the first time, he recognized the terrible truth. The absence of communication was itself the message. The humans were speaking through the language of capability and restraint, a conversation conducted through the dialect of controlled violence. It was a language the hegemony had forgotten how to speak. 4 hours of suffocating silence passed. The surviving hegemony vessels drifted in formation, weapons powered down, shields depleted, officers whispering prayers to ancestral deities long forgotten in their species' age of technological superiority. When the Retribution finally initiated communication, the shock wave of terror that passed through the fleet was almost palpable. The message, transmitted simultaneously across all bands in perfect high hegemony language, including cultural honorifics and regional dialectical nuances, appeared on every screen. "You have violated Terran space. Your intentions have been judged hostile. You will power down weapon systems and prepare for boarding. Non-compliance will result in consequences." The linguistic precision suggested years of study, while the hegemony had only just discovered Earth. "They've been watching us," Vexorn whispered, exoskeleton now permanently faded to the pale blue of prolonged stress. "For how long?" Admiral Kistel, Supreme Commander Vexorn, and Science Officer Trillax were selected as representatives. As their shuttle approached the Retribution, Trillax obsessively checked her atmospheric filters, convinced the humans must use toxic gas or biological agents to compensate for what must surely be physical inferiority. "Our species has survived first contact with 73 civilizations," Kistel reminded his officers, attempting to steady their nerves and his own. "We will adapt. We will understand. We will eventually." He left the traditional conclusion. "We will conquer," unspoken. The shuttle's docking procedure was guided by invisible forces that bypassed its navigation systems entirely. When the airlock cycled open, The hegemony delegation froze in collective shock. The humans were physically unimposing, smaller than adolescent hegemony offspring, with soft exteriors lacking natural armor, claws, or venom sacs. They stood on two limbs instead of the stability optimal six. Their eyes, only two, lacked compound structure or enhanced spectrum capability. "Welcome aboard the TCS Retribution," said a female human, her translator unnecessary, as she spoke flawless hegemony prime. "I am Captain Elena Novak." Trillax's scientific mind rebelled. How could such physically vulnerable creatures create such devastating technology? As Captain Novak led them through the ship, the true nature of humanity's advantage became clear. Where hegemony vessels followed standardized designs perfected and unchanged over millennia, every system on the Retribution showed evidence of constant iteration. They passed a navigation station where 3 separate control systems operated in parallel. A maintenance shaft revealed backup power conduits for backup power conduits. Weapon control stations featured both digital interfaces and manual analog controls. "This is madness," whispered Vexorn, examining a navigation station with 5 redundant star mapping systems. "They've designed systems assuming 60% of the ship could be destroyed and still function." Captain Novak smiled thinly. "We call it contingency planning, an evolutionary adaptation." In the ship's medical bay, a human doctor demonstrated treatments designed for radiation exposure, vacuum exposure, and traumatic impact, all common space hazards that the hegemony had engineered their species to simply withstand. "You modify your technology to survive," Trillax observed, "while we modified ourselves." "Different evolutionary pressures," Captain Novak replied. "Your species evolved in a stable system with a predictable primary star. We evolved on a death world, orbiting a variable star, on a tectonically unstable planet with extreme climate fluctuation." The implications stunned the hegemony representatives. The humans hadn't advanced along a different technological path by choice. They had done so by necessity. Their physical vulnerability had driven them to create systems of unprecedented redundancy and resilience. This ship, Kistol realized, studying a schematic display, is designed to continue fighting even while being destroyed. Captain Novak nodded. "That's the fundamental difference between our species, Admiral. You built an empire that has never known true existential threat. We built a civilization that has never known anything else." In the Retribution's diplomatic chamber, negotiations for the hegemony's withdrawal proceeded with mechanical efficiency. The humans made no demands for reparations, claimed no territory, imposed no penalties. They simply established boundaries with coordinates so precise they'd referenced stellar drift calculations extending centuries into the future. As a gesture of educational exchange, Captain Novak granted the alien delegation limited access to human historical archives. What they discovered in the sterile data room terrified them more than the one-sided battle. Science Officer Trillax's chromatophores flashed emergency patterns as she absorbed the data flowing across multiple screens. By the first egg, she gasped, her scientific detachment crumbling. Earth is what our xenobiologists classify as a Class 9 death world. The holographic displays showed humans evolving amidst predators, pathogens, extreme weather, and tectonic instability, constantly at war with their environment and each other. Where the hegemony's historical archives documented gradual, measured progress, human history appeared as a chaotic tapestry of collapse and renewal, catastrophe and adaptation. Unlike the hegemony, which developed space travel during a 3,000-year golden age of unified peace, humanity clawed its way to the stars during its most violent period, with competing nations driving innovation through conflict. The Retribution, Admiral Kistol realized with dawning horror as he reviewed military documentation, isn't an exceptional warship, it's standard issue. The archives revealed thousands of similar vessels, each incorporating design lessons learned from previous conflicts. The hegemony had accidentally awakened a species that transformed warfare into an art form. that built redundancies into redundancies, that planned for failure at every stage, because their entire evolutionary history was defined by overcoming it. Commander Vexhorn, reviewing diplomatic records, suddenly slammed his appendage against the table. "They've known about us for 73 orbital cycles," he hissed, trembling with indignation. The archives confirmed his worst fears. Humanity had intercepted hegemony communications decades ago, patiently studying alien technology while concealing their own advancements. Earth's fractured governance and primitive technology were elaborate deceptions, a comprehensive planetary masquerade. They wanted us to underestimate them. Trillax whispered, her scientific worldview collapsing around her. They wanted us to attack first. Most disturbing were the contingency plans. The archives contained detailed response protocols for thousands of potential first contact scenarios, each meticulously war-gamed and refined. The hegemony's standard intimidation protocol had been anticipated and countered decades before their ships even entered the solar system. In the corner of the data room, a young human lieutenant observed their reactions with clinical interest, making notes on what appeared to be paper, deliberately analog, unhackable technology. Another layer of human paranoia that now made perfect, terrifying sense. "I don't understand," Trillax finally said, turning to the silent human observer. "Your technology suggests you could have expanded to nearby star systems centuries ago. Why remain confined to your solar system?" The lieutenant looked up from his notepad, his expression unreadable. "We didn't remain confined. We just made sure nobody knew we were there." The implication struck Kistal like a physical blow. How many other systems had humans already visited? How many other species had they studied? How much of what the hegemony considered uninhabited space was already under invisible human observation? "You should know," the lieutenant added casually, "that the Retribution is our diplomatic vessel." The unspoken question hung in the air. What then were their actual warships like? The Grand Matriarch's reception chamber, unchanged for 12,000 years, felt suffocatingly small to Admiral Kistal. Once resplendent in his military decorations, he now stood before the hegemony's ruler wearing the gray cloak of failure, his once vibrant exoskeleton permanently faded to the dull blue of traumatic stress. The great archive crystals recorded his testimony for posterity as he delivered the most consequential military report in hegemony history. "They let us go," he concluded, voice hollow. "They could have destroyed us entirely." His report sent seismic tremors through the Empire. Not only must the conquest of Earth be abandoned, but defensive preparations must begin immediately. The 16 highest genetic lineages of the hegemony gathered in emergency conclave, a procedure not invoked since the Starfall plague 19 generations past. Intelligence reports confirmed the shocking development. Humanity didn't claim hegemony territory or demand reparations, as would any rational species with military superiority. They simply established boundaries with the clear implication that violation meant annihilation. "They did not even request our technical knowledge," observed the technology minister, her confusion evident. "All conquered species desire our superior advancements." "They did not want our technology," Kistal explained, "because to them, it is not superior. It is merely different." In the months that followed, the hegemony's most brilliant minds secluded themselves in research enclaves, poring over scans of the Retribution, struggling to understand how they misjudged human technology so completely. The answer, when it emerged, was profoundly humbling. The hegemony's linear technological development, each advance building predictably upon the last, left them with specific blind spots that humans, with their chaotic, competitive, and crisis-driven innovation, naturally exploited. While the hegemony perfected energy weapons, humans mastered kinetics. While the hegemony developed impenetrable shields, humans created materials that absorbed energy. While the hegemony standardized their systems for optimal efficiency, humans built redundancy upon redundancy, anticipating failure at every stage. Throughout the galaxy, as news spread through established channels and clandestine networks, The interstellar balance of power shifted overnight. 3 minor species, long dominated by hegemony influence, declared independence within a single rotation cycle. The Seventh Conclave, rivals to hegemony expansion, dispatched diplomatic envoys to Earth with unprecedented haste. In his private chambers, Kistal, now serving as special advisor on human affairs, reviewed reports of human historical figures. Alexander, Shaka, Genghis, Napoleon, Patton, military minds whose strategies were forged in conflict rather than simulation. Each utilized environments others considered uninhabitable, employed techniques others deemed primitive, achieved victories others thought impossible. Most sophisticated species evolve away from conflict, he dictated for the official archive. Humans evolved through it. Kistal initiated a radical reform of hegemony military doctrine, one that acknowledged a universe more complex than their 15 millennia of expansion had suggested. The galaxy must now contend with humanity, a species that doesn't seek conquest but has mastered the art of being unconquerable. As he dimmed the lights in his chamber, Kistal wondered what terrors must have shaped a species that builds warships designed to fight on even when mostly destroyed. A psychology so alien that it could only be described in the ancient hegemony tongue as Kisathic, thriving through trauma. His final entry in the archive, classified at the highest level, contained a single prediction. They will not remain within their boundaries forever. And when they come, it will not be as conquerors, but as survivors of something far worse than the hegemony could ever be.